Hello everyone, this is Bruce Stephen Holmes, the Timeless Voyager, and I have on the line today from Virginia. Are you in Virginia Beach or?
Oh no, not Virginia Beach.
Okay, you're actually in Virginia.
We're in the foothills of the Blue Ridge. That's where we like to say we are.
Foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains.
Mm-hmm.
Robert A. Monroe. Robert Monroe has written two books that I'm familiar with at this point, Journeys Out of the Body and Far Journeys. There's been a biography written about you by Bayard Stockton, is that right?
That's right.
Okay, and that's called Catapult. Let me tell my listeners a little bit about you. You have a degree from Ohio University after studying engineering and journalism.
Ohio State University.
Ohio State.
There's a difference.
All right. Okay. And you then entered the broadcasting industry, and in 1939 went to New York, where you created and produced over 400 radio and TV network programs. So I feel gratitude that you're even talking to me here on the radio.
Well, you shouldn't feel gratitude, just have fun, that's all.
All right. In addition, you directed and wrote and composed all the orchestral music for the programs, is that right?
Yes.
Wow, much of which is still in use in television and motion pictures today.
Some of it.
Okay. You formed the Robert Monroe Productions, which at its peak produced 28 radio network shows weekly.
That's right.
Later becoming vice president of programs and director of Mutual Broadcasting System until 1956. Became president of Lowry Associates. Is that Lowry or Lowry?
Like your pig.
All right. Formed Jefferson Cable Corporation, of which you were the president until 1976. Founded the Monroe Institute of Applied Sciences in 1973. I see your facilities and laboratories are in Afton?
Nearby, yes.
Nearby Afton, Virginia. Granted a generic patent in 1975 for a method and technique of inducing relaxation and sleep. And you refer to that as the FFR. What does that stand for?
That stands for Frequency Following Response. We researched and determined certain sound patterns in sound, which means they are non-invasive, as it were. They're not electrical stimulation, is what I'm saying. And these induce various states of consciousness, basically. We call it a frequency following response because you can identify them by taking an EEG, a brainwave study, and see these particular patterns within the brain.
All right, we're going to get back to that. You're internationally known for your work with the effects of sound waves on human behavior, which is what this is primarily about. Is that right?
That's true.
All right. You're a pioneer in exploring out-of-the-body experiences, and your book, Journeys Out of the Body, has become the undisputed classic in the field of out-of-body experience research. Kind of hard to say that, but I think that pretty much sums it up. Anything you want to add to that before we start, Mr. McCoy?
No, you're doing very well.
Great. All right, for my listeners, let's start with this very important question. What is an out-of-the-body experience?
Well, let's start and make a number that's interesting. Not our studies, but recent studies, and that means within the last 10 years or so, indicated that 25% of the population in the United States remembers having at least one spontaneous out-of-body experience. What is it? Well, it's best described as a state of consciousness awareness, which means your mind is awake and alert, that does not depend on physical sensory input, meaning it is acting from your perspective separate and apart from your physical body. And as to what and how that is, there's been a lot of scientific discussion as to what that is, and our religions have given it a name too. But basically, you are able to exercise facsimiles is the best word of the sensory input that you have in the physical sense, in the physical continuity, as it were. So if you can think of that you are perceiving and separate and apart from this physical mechanism that provides you with this input, you're able to see, for example, and you're able to hear, and in some cases able to touch. Now, I've never been able to smell very well or taste in the out-of-body state, but that out-of-body consciousness, as it were, is able to be let's say 2 inches away from the physical, or if you want to put it at the extreme, you can go to Mars and cruise around Mars and see what's going on there. It's that unlimited.
All right. Now, there are those who would refer to this as the astral body. Would that be a good term to use here?
Well, we don't like it, and the reason we don't like it is because it has sort of an occult connotation to it, in the sense that it was used in a time sort of prior to the scientific model that we attempt to follow. So we and a psychologist friend way back in the early 60s came up with the OBE, and that sounded too bad, so we settled for OB, out-of-body experiences.
So you like to look at this thing in a pragmatic way, I guess, scientifically speaking.
Very much.
All right, now let's say then pragmatically, what would be the purpose of an out-of-the-body experience then?
Well, that's the enigma, the question. That took me a lot of work to find out what value it had, if any. And the second thing is that through the years, what purpose, that's open to a lot of discussion. There have been all sorts of ways that one can use it and one does use it. But I think the key thing is to recognize that we are firmly sure now that everyone goes out of their body during what we call delta sleep, or deep sleep, as we call it.
So when we see delta waves,
yes, and that's a sleep where you are at very low level of physical response, and it's that deep sleep that we all have during our sleep cycle, for anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes, and maybe sometimes more.
So there are cycles here, the cycles of delta.
That's right. We all have cycles of delta. We have cycles of an hour and a half cycle of sleep, and that's a pattern we have all during our whole sleep period.
Mm-hmm.
But a part of that is the delta sleep state, and we sort of drift down to that delta state, and then we get there, and then we become totally inert. And blood pressure goes down, temperature goes down, and we respond very little to any external stimuli. We found that in lab studies that a person in the out-of-body state resembles near perfectly the profile of delta sleep.
All right, now the difference, of course, is their consciousness. Is that right?
That's true. Mm-hmm.
Now, let's come back to delta for a moment. Let's say scientifically speaking, or let's say objectively. Objectively, is there any way to know whether a person is having a conscious out-of-body experience versus can I say unconscious?
Oh, by all means.
All right, an unconscious
certainly.
out-of-body experience? Is there a way to tell the difference?
Oh, yes, indeed. For example, a person in the out-of-body state, and let's say that by a peculiar kind of means of establishing a relationship with the physical body, can report in while they're in the out-of-body state. Now, I cannot do that, but we have had any number of people who can.
All right, now let me stop for a second. What you're saying is that people that you have worked with, and I noticed this in your book because you have information. It seems like they're, I guess, recorded out-of-body experience. Is that correct?
That's true. Mm-hmm.
All right. Those experiences from those people are such that they're actually able to respond while they are out of body. And what do we know about that then? They actually report...
They report what they're doing and how they're doing, and some very few, and it is few, that you can communicate back to them. In other words, they're using their hearing and vocal means to, in turn, stay in contact with you. It's a learned thing, a thing that you have to learn, and not everyone can do it. I did not learn how to do it.
All right, now this happens, again, we're talking about the fact that, now if an EEG looks at a person who is talking to you during this state, does the EEG show delta still? It
shows delta superimposed with a beta signal, or a composite beta signal that indicates a part of the brain is operating to do this communication process.
I know that's very interesting. I presume that was really interesting, actually.
Yeah, the speech center becomes activated.
Okay, so let's come back then to this question then that I started out with. What then is the purpose, other than, let's say, exploration or pioneering? And I'm sure, Robert, that this question was asked when, for example, Columbus went to the New World. People said, "Why would you want to go there?" So I'm sure that this question is being asked now to you. Why would people want to do this type of research?
Well, I had to face that question all the way back in, would you believe it, back in 1958 and 59, which is a long ways back. And it took me, I desperately needed to learn how to control it, because I would suddenly move out of my body anytime I would lie down, and that became very embarrassing and very frightening, and I had to learn how to control it. So conventional science had no answer whatsoever for that, and my close friends, psychologists and psychiatrists, didn't have the answer either. So we set up an R&D program in my company trying to find out answers for this. And one of the things that happened, it took, for example, a full year of validation and documentation of where I went and what I did and what I perceived in order for me to recognize that it was nothing more than an hallucination. So it's not that easy to transfer it other than from what might be a dream or an hallucination into a reality. It just takes to that left brain of ours, it takes sometimes a great deal of evidence to convince it.
All right. Are you saying then that when the person, let's just use an example, when a person first has an out-of-body experience, they may not be able to logically understand what has happened?
That's quite true. And there are some very common, we rationalize it away because we just don't have culturally any answer for it. The best way I can describe that is, for example, that we now know that anyone who has a flying dream is symbolizing an out-of-body state. They can't identify it any other way, so they have a flying dream. And some people have to rationalize it by say they were in an airplane.
So they're actually experiencing the feeling of free flight, and then through the dream they interpret it in whatever way they can through their logic.
Yes, and virtually all cases that we've encountered where a person has a falling dream, and that's re-entering the physical body. And so how many people, if you can pick up hundreds of thousands of people who have had a falling dream where they fall and wake up, and that's re-entering the physical.
So when a person has this falling dream, or when the person has a flying dream, what we have then in actuality is an awakening of their consciousness to the fact that there is an out-of-body experience going on.
That's right, but this their interpretation of it, because they are totally unaware of it, has to translate it somehow, so they do the best they can.
All right, so I guess the first step here is that a person starts awakening to the flying dream. Is that correct?
Not necessarily, no.
Well, otherwise, what would you say would be the... I'm talking before they did any research. For example, there might be someone who says to you, "I've never had a flying dream." Well, I don't know if anybody would ever say that, but...
Well, they could, yes. I can give you one of the most, currently, the most interesting facets of out-of-body activity that has certainly been attracting attention over the last, say, 10 years. And I think they have an estimate now of, what is it, something like 25 million people that they know of that have had it, and that's a near-death experience, which is a rather extreme version of the out-of-body. And the one thing that certainly does with everyone who has an NDE, as they call it, is get them past the belief stage into the knowing that they survive physical death. And that is a very profound piece of knowledge, that if you get that knowledge, it alters your life considerably.
Okay. let's move along for a second. Let's talk a little bit about Locale 2. Is that how you say it?
That's one way of putting it, yes.
Right.
That's the old-fashioned way.
All right, what's the new way?
Well, we call it a phasing process now.
All right. Do I need to, is there some background before we jump into that, or?
Well, say, what was it, 20 years ago, I called it Locale 2. Now we've gotten, again, a better and more scientific explanation for what's taking place.
All right.
Would you like to hear that?
I'd love to.
Think of it this way. I, at this moment, are very carefully focused in time-space. We have a focusing mechanism that we call a physical body. And it gives us all this heavy physical sensory input that gets us and keeps us phased into time-space. In other words, we're here. Our consciousness is here. Our mind is totally here. The moment that you stop focusing in that time-space that intently, let's call it inattention, just that much, you have become slightly out of phase with this physical time-space. This means that you are in thought, as it were, instead of totally there. And let's say that you're still 90 degrees focused in time-space and 10 degrees into something, somewhere, some way else. And then you have the stages called daydreaming, which are a little more out of phase. And then you have a controlled out of phase state, say, call it meditation, where let's say that you are 30 to 35% phased into another reality system, or getting in touch with it, and while you are still, great part of you is still in phase with time-space. It doesn't take much to follow that phasing relationship outward to where you get into states caused by drugs, alcohol, and things like that, where you are more and more out of phase. You get into illnesses, and they create a greater degree of out of phase. And very innocently, we all fall asleep. And then we are, say, 90 degrees out of phase. We're still in touch with time-space, but our consciousness, our mind is elsewhere. So that's a real quick version of what we call phasing.
All right, so let's come back to this phase then, which is now, which phase is Locale 2?
Locale 2 is somewhere beyond the stage we call sleep.
All right. What happens there?
Well, this is, as we now perceive it, is a mass of phase relationships of which the outer body is one part of a spectrum. If you can think of consciousness as being a spectrum that encompasses time-space here on Earth and moves into other energy systems as it changes in pattern, so that when you are asleep, you are drifting even deeper into what I said, into delta sleep, where you are very much, say, 90% out of phase with time-space. And this means that you have an awareness, a consciousness there. The fact that you don't remember it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Now, what we're talking about when you say Locale 2 is that area beyond that is symbolized by us in delta sleep, by us meaning our culture.
Let me see. Am I going to guess that 100% is death?
100% is death, yes.
Or what we perceive as the death experience here.
That's right, and all that is very simply that if you have that wonderful knowledge that you do survive physical death, no matter what you do and act and be and think here, you are merely then don't have a focusing mechanism to phase you into time-space. It's all fallen apart, so you can't stay here any longer. So then you are there. You are there in that area past delta sleep. But you are there, you're conscious, you're, quote, awake, and you have means of perceiving there. And that's what the out-of-body state is a temporary visit there, if you want to think of it that way.
This is Bruce Stephen Holmes, the Timeless Voyager, and I'm speaking today with Robert A. Monroe, author of Far Journeys and Journeys Out of the Body, probably the world's authority right now on out-of-body experiences. Are there esoteric schools in what used to call Locale 2, or are there other worlds, other beings? What are we looking at then there?
Well, what you're looking at, first of all, are the multitude of, when you get into this other area, non-physical area of being, states of being. The first thing you encounter, of course, is what we call the belief system territories, where one is attracted automatically after they exit here by this phasing process because it's something familiar to them. And these are, of course, all of the various religions have a belief system that creates a state of being in this non-physical area, this non-physical part of this consciousness continuum. I know it sounds like a bunch of gobbledygook, but it's very simple.
Well, actually, it doesn't. But I think the question I have then is, all right. So first come the belief systems.
Yeah.
All right. What's next?
What's next? Well, if you can get, and there are a lot of people more people than you would care to think, that are not, let's call it, entrapped in belief systems.
All right. Maybe I could stop for a moment. Let's just hit on this belief system once more. Does that mean that if you are a Christian, you will come across saints and perhaps Jesus the Christ, etc.?
All of that, yes. That's all. That is one large part of this consciousness spectrum.
All right. Now
that is Buddhism. So is Islam. All sorts of it.
All right. So the belief systems that you are carrying in this, let's say, time-space continuum, follow into this first area. Is that correct?
Very much so, yes.
All right. Now, and then you're saying to me that there are people who do not have belief systems, let's say, for example, an atheist or an existentialist?
No, they don't have to be that. They just their intellect grows to a point where that's not enough.
All right.
I can ask you a very simple question, Bruce. This is where you get into the interest or fun part of it. Would you like to spend all eternity lying on a cloud and strumming a harp?
Absolutely not.
Well, you understand what I mean?
Matter of fact, that's what annoyed me when I went to Lutheran school as a kid. I kept thinking to myself, I love the idea, but I mean, is there something I can do there?
Well, that's then I get around to the basis of what's so stimulating and exciting about the out-of-body experience and becoming proficient at it, is that you realize there are a myriad of other options, and most of them make the belief systems look rather silly.
All right.
And those options are so broad and so detailed. I can give you option number one, which is a very, very common one, and that's to recycle and have another lifetime here.
All right.
And that is, all of us do that many, many times because we have become addicted to being human.
So we like the focus on time-space.
Well, we like being human. We like to eat. We like to. We like the sexual drive. We like the excitement, the fun of it, and all the process of being human. We like so much that we got to come back and have more. And there's no law that makes you do that. That's the important part.
So
it's you that wants to do this.
So people who say you have to come back because of your karma, you can undo your karma in other places.
And you don't need to undo it. You can undo it yourself by a simple twist of your thinking, that's all. And that's so. But you see, that is an option to come back. And people, each of us maybe probably does that several thousand times, to give you an idea. See, human recorded history, as we know it, is very, very small. If you go back 800,000 years, then you begin to get where humankind has been.
Meaning
that there have been civilizations far surpassing ours that have existed here, and human civilizations. And I should probably say humanoid because they were somewhat different from us.
Okay. So the time spectrum that we look at is very, very small and incidental.
In terms of recorded history.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So, but you think that's the one option, to come back and recycle.
Okay.
And then you get in setting the belief systems aside. Then you got this great span of the whole physical universe, and you can go and live another type of intelligent life on some other planet, 6 million light years from here, or something like that. And we know of about 5 anyway already. But mind you, these are not human forms.
Okay.
That's the interesting thing to realize.
You can't leave me. You can't leave me and my listeners with of 5.
One of the ones that we've encountered most, oddly enough, is we call it the Alligator System.
Okay.
Because the physical body there, it resembles very much an alligator.
Okay.
But it has an intelligence equal or superior to ours, and certainly it isn't technical culture such as we are, because it doesn't need it.
Mm-hmm.
But
they look like alligators.
They look like alligators, and they have a lot more fun than we do.
Because alligators are amphibious, and
that's right, and it's a lot of fun. You'd be surprised. And
I would be surprised. I'd like very much to I'm not going to get into this now. Okay.
Whereas in the alligator doesn't mind wallowing around in mud. It just feels good.
Good.
We try to keep clean.
What is the lifespan for one of these alligator type?
About, as near as we can figure it, about 300 years of our type of years.
Okay.
So, and then you go on from that, and there are these other types, and one of the most fascinating types is a one that's an intelligent bird, and it's a bird culture, and that's nice because they're not only amphibious, but they fly too.
So it's an amphibious bird.
That's right, like a duck, or something like that. Although it doesn't have the same attributes that we look at as birds, but they're nicely planned and nicely organized. They're very beautiful design. And they're a lot of fun because you can soar like an eagle. If you've ever flown gliders or sailplanes, you come very close to saying, "Well, I want to go there."
Well, now we have a real mixture here on Earth of different animal types. Are you saying that in a system like this, that they would be considered the intelligentsia of that?
They're the dominant species, yes. In their worlds, these are the dominant species, just as we are the dominant species here on Earth.
Do they have humanoids there, or?
No, they couldn't make it.
So really, they're the top of the chain in that particular place?
That's true. Mm-hmm.
All right.
So you say, I'm trying to answer that fundamental question. What would you do with being able to willfully, consciously control and move in the out-of-body state?
I love it.
You can pre-explore all these things before you do have a physical exit here. So do you have a pretty good idea what you'd like to do next before you are forced to do that, see?
All right, so these are the other worlds. What about esoteric schools?
Well, where?
Again...
You mean here on Earth?
No, outside in the different areas of what you used to call Locale 2.
They are, a lot of those are attached to belief systems.
Oh, they are? That's in the belief system area. So they don't go higher and higher?
Well, within the limits of that belief system.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then so after you've exhausted the physical universe, which may take an eternity if you want to get addicted there, can you see how easy you get addicted?
Oh, yeah.
Timeless Voyager Radio will return after these messages. You are listening to Timeless Voyager Radio.
I don't know how many times I've been here, but...
Well, just think of these other areas that...
I know how many times I wake up each morning.
Just think of how many times you could go play being an alligator or this super bird. It's very addictive, just like ours is, from a different point of view.
So is there... all right, so now are we talking then that there is a level beyond this addictive part?
Well, the point is that these various other intelligent species mature, and I guess that's the word, just as we eventually mature, and we immigrate. And the reason we immigrate is because we've had all we can get out of this, and very frankly, you know what the real reason for immigration is?
No.
We become bored.
Okay.
All right? And you can say, how could you possibly become bored? Because you realize that you could become involved here forever in finding out each electron and each biological pattern, everything else, and it goes on endlessly. So if you get a good sampling of it, and you find almost that, well, this is where I came in. Well, it's a repeating cycle. Anyway, that gives you an idea of that. And then, of course, the thing you're probably waiting to hear is, what do you do in a non-physical sense?
Yeah, let's do that.
And then, or that's the vista that truly opens up, because one of the things that you become aware of, that a graduate of this compressed learning human school, it becomes the equivalent of a god in these other energy systems. Because of things that we learn so naturally, we think are, they're just everyday stuff, is exquisitely valuable in these other systems. And as such, I can only tell you it is the temptation gets very great, not to be a god, but to do things in these other energy systems. For example, I reach and I, without thinking, pick up a cup of coffee and sip the coffee and put it down again. That is a manipulation of energy, mechanical energy, but there are there's electrical energy and chemical energy all connected with it. The ease with which we learn to do these kinds of things can be applied in other kinds of energy. Can you see?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. And the other system that we learn so vividly, we learn measurement. It's so hard to understand that, everybody learns measurement. So we're a polarized environment. We have good and bad, or constructive or destructive, whatever labels you want to put. So we learn measurement. And that polarity measurement system, again, is very, very valuable in evaluation. But what we really have, most of all, that we take with us, and you do take it with you, is the thing we came to get. And that is, if we use the symbol left brain, that's what it is.
Okay.
Or intelligence, the ability to analyze, calculate. All of that is what you came to get, and you take it with you. And, that's the stuff that is pure, invaluable elsewhere in these other energy systems.
All right,
does that lead it up enough?
Oh yeah, I think we're really, and I'm sure everybody's got lots of questions about these things, but what I'd like to do is I'd like to move on to a couple other things too.
By all means.
First of all, the FFR and how that's tied into hemi-sync. I think those two things are tied together. Is that correct?
They are, yes. Mm-hmm.
And perhaps you might explain those. I'm sure my listeners, and certainly I would like to hear a better explanation than I understand at this point.
Well, bear in mind, first of all, that in the late 50s, we were, and we still are, we think, sometimes we wonder, we were and are professional sound people. In other words, sound was our business. And we had been in business for some time in the production of sound in various ways. So we turned to sound quite naturally in order to do these things. And first of all, in order to find out how we could begin to control the out-of-body experience, we began to use sound to affect consciousness. And we soon learned that we could, by using, I might add, known brainwave frequencies and converting them into what sound amplitudes, now not frequency but sound amplitudes, we were able to, say, induce sleep very easily and to stay awake very easily. And that was the beginning. Those are categories of consciousness. If you think of a sound being loud and soft, that's difference in amplitude. And we use that running frequency of amplitude to create a resonance by listening to it, where the brain waves that of any individual listening to that would indeed begin to have a frequency-following response. The frequency of that amplitude would be reflected in the brain waves. So if you wanted a person to go to sleep, you would feed a particular system of theta and delta waves, and they would get sleepy. So what we did then in terms of work with that, we were working with amplitude. And then, as we went on, we found a better way to do it, because these brainwave frequencies that are common in the human brain are of a frequency that is lower than human hearing. Let's use an illustration that here's an 8 hertz signal, which means 8 cycles per second, that we cannot hear. So how to get it into the human brain other than using an amplitude method? We found then the binaural beat would work very beautifully in that respect. Now, we did not invent the binaural beat by any manner of means, but in essence it works this way. If we put a 100 hertz audio signal, which you can hear, and put it in one ear, and put a 108 hertz signal in the other ear, the differential between those two would be an 8 hertz signal. Now what happens in that case is that beat frequency is 8 hertz, the difference between the two. When we used that and had a person listen to it, the brain would synthesize that 8 hertz frequency. The brain wouldn't hear it, incidentally, but the electrical signals, in essence, in the brain would synthesize that 8 hertz differential. That's binaural beat, and that's what we call hemi-sync.
Okay, now what did that 8 do as far as consciousness was concerned?
Well, I used that one arbitrarily because that is a slight variation of it is what is part of the Schumann resonance. That is the one that we as humans grew up with through millions of years, and it will create a form of physical relaxation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, now this is the frequency following response.
Now this is a frequency following response in actual frequency instead of amplitude. That's what the binaural beat helps us do.
All right.
Because then we are putting into the brain by sound the actual 8 hertz signal, as against having it simply be an amplitude pattern that is only in one signal.
Okay, now even though this stuff is a little complicated, but still it's good to go over it. Now, is hemi-sync then the use of this in ways to create different levels of consciousness?
That's true, very much so. And what we do is that we use this differential process of binaural beats as being about 50% more efficient than simply the amplitude system.
Now you are able to create then, for example, a meditative state.
Oh yes, that's real easy.
Now what was your comparison there? What did you use to decide that this was a meditative state?
And that it was or was not?
Was.
Well, it depends on what type of meditative. We found that there are different kinds of meditative states. For example, years back there was a great to-do about having alpha, getting into the alpha state.
Okay.
Were you around during that time?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And it was, let's get ourselves into alpha. Alpha is just a state of conscious relaxation, and that's we have not found it interesting enough to play with.
What about theta?
Theta is a state where a lot of creativity occurs in theta, and a lot of it's great for ideas, word pictures, and things like that. It's the crossover state between this type of consciousness and the consciousness of delta sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And because of that, you are partially freed of the restrictions that are upon you during this normal wakefulness here. And as a result, you are freed, your mind is freed to perceive in ways it has not perceived before. And that's where a lot of meditation takes place.
What about a meditative technique like Transcendental Meditation?
I don't at all pretend to be totally aware of exactly what they're doing now, but they have developed a pattern of establishing such a state by forms of which I'm not at all tightly familiar, but some type of repetitive practice, whether it be what they call a mantra or something like that, evidently does produce a state down in theta. I'm not sure how they do it.
Now, let's move from the meditative state. You have focus 10, you call it. What is focus 10?
10 is a very specific state that might be called a meditative state, but we make it much simpler than that and keep it very broad ranged. We take a simple definition and say the mind is awake, body is asleep. The body is just detuned, actually, so that these heavy physical sensory input patterns are not interfering with your ability to think. And that's people make quite a great discovery in 10, in the sense that they discover they do not need all of that 5 physical sensory patterns in order to be awake, alert, and full of mind consciousness, as it were.
All right, now what about 12 and 15? These are pretty spectacular as far as I was concerned.
Well, they do get fun as they go along. 12 is a thing that we've discovered through the years, and we've been, incidentally, we're in about the 15th year of our Gateway program that works with these particular consciousness states.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about that Gateway program after this. This will be good.
So anyway, 12 is a state where, once having detuned these other physical inputs, we find that you can begin to perceive in other ways. We call it a state of expanded awareness. But what has happened is that these other means of perception have been covered over or overwhelmed by all the physical input. And the moment those get detuned and you still retain your consciousness, you begin to perceive in these other ways.
And 15?
Yeah, and 15 is an interim nice state, which we call the state of no time. And it is fun because people have great expectations of what state of no time is. Not no space, but no time. And the interesting part about it, of course, is that nothing is there. The people get into 15 and have all these things they expect of it, when it's really, it has to be a self-instigating state. Yeah, nothing will happen unless you make it happen. You can lie around in no time forever unless you take thought steps in order to move in any given direction.
This is Bruce Stephen Holmes. The time was Voyager, and I'm back here with Robert A. Monroe, author of Far Journeys and Journeys Out of the Body. When we left, we were about to talk about the Gateway program. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what it is and perhaps how it started?
Well, it's kind of interesting in that you have the Voyager program, and our prime Gateway program is called the Voyage. So maybe you are a Voyager and don't know it.
All right.
Gateway began years ago, and years ago means about 1973, I guess, when we were not particularly, in any broad sense, disseminating the results of our research back at that time. But we had developed these techniques, and one day one representative of Esalen, if you know where Esalen is?
Yeah, Northern California.
That's right. It's at...
near Big Sur.
Yeah, near Big Sur. Called and asked why one of our psychologist friends probably instigated, why don't we do a workshop at Esalen based upon the methods we had developed. And we thought, oh, that's fine. That'll give us a brand new bunch of subjects to test. So what we did, we gathered a couple of our engineers together, and off we went out to Big Sur and Esalen and conducted this program over a weekend. And it was most fascinating because we had an idea of how to do it, and the idea was not necessarily the way to do it. We thought we'll base it on sleep cycles, and we'll let a subject go through some training programs and for an hour and a half, and then sleep an hour and a half. And that worked beautifully, because in 1 hour and a half they'd obviously eat. But the poor trainers of it didn't have any chance to sleep at all. So I have a wonderful picture of Bill Yost, this electronics engineer who was helping conduct this, if you can imagine it, falling out of his chair in sleep after about 8 or 9 hours of this.
So the trainers had to get on this schedule too, otherwise.
The trainers didn't learn how to sleep that hour and a half along with everybody else. So anyway, that attracted attention, and then we did one at Esalen in San Francisco. We were smarter that time. And they thought, well, that was interesting, worked a great deal, and we had, at that time, there were physicists there, and doctors and everything else were attending it, and we got all this response. So what do? Well, we thought, this is a fine means to really have a broad-banded research program where we'll have a lot of subjects. So we accepted the invitation to start doing these in various parts of the country. And we thought, well, we have to have a name for it, so we called it the M5000, thinking if we had the magic number of 5,000 people attending it, we would have a baseline of information that would be fantastic. Well, after about 2 or 3 or 4 years of this, we decided that we would never reach that 5,000 number, so we would give it some other name. So we gave it the name of the Gateway Program. And so we began moving this up in various conference centers out west. We did it at a place called Westerbeck Ranch, if you know where that is. Anyway, we did it in various parts of the country and overseas in Hawaii and in England and places like that. And finally, we got to the point where we felt a better need to do it in a more productive form, so we built a facility here in Virginia specifically to handle this Gateway Program. And it has worked magnificently, and we've been here for over 10 years. What we've done, we have each participant in a Gateway Program. He comes here for a week, and what he does is he, in essence, has what we call a check unit, which is an acronym for Controlled Holistic Environmental Chamber. And he spends a good part of his time in that, in other words, in working in taped exercises, and he even sleeps in it at night because it's a controlled sleep environment. So that has evolved through the years into what it is today, which is, I would say, at least 40% of the participants in the program are professionals. By that means psychologists, psychiatrists, MDs, researchers. Oh, and we have our good share of physicists because it's a thing that appeals to them very much. And we move on past 15 into other states of consciousness up to what we call 21. And why we stop there, who can ever know. And at 21, you are right on the edge of being able to probe all these other reality systems that include certainly the out-of-body and include the post-mortem area, as it were. It's a great freedom there at 21, but you have lost all fear of these unknown areas, and that's the key.
Now, you need to lose fear to get into 21, is that correct?
Yes, and this is basically a very careful fear-reducing process so that you're not afraid of these unknown states. And the way we do it is that we prove very succinctly to the individual that he's only learning to control what he's been doing all the time. And it's the control factor that counts. So that when he wants to go to 10, he can do it. Doesn't need the tape, as a matter of fact, after that. Or doesn't need to go to sleep. He doesn't need a tape to go to sleep. He doesn't need a tape to go and explore all these because he has no fear of it anymore. He has not the fear of the unknown.
Is this where we come across the dreamers, the locked-in, the wild ones?
Oh, yes.
This is where all these... what are the dreamers? What are the dreamers?
These are people that are basically locked into belief systems that they can't get out of, whatever it may be. And that's a polite way of saying it.
All right, the locked-ins are part of that then.
Yeah, that's right.
The wild ones.
Well, these are people who have basically died and found that, oh, I'm free and I can do all the things that I was prevented from doing when I was in a physical body. But they forget that they don't have a physical body to do it.
So what do?
Well, they just keep trying.
How about the others?
Which others?
I don't know. I thought I was.
Well, there's quite a few others, but
like the last timers in the scene.
Yeah, well, those are all part of a long story, Bruce. And Lord knows we could go on for 2 hours if we get into that kind of run.
All right. Let me back up for 1 second. We were talking about the Gateway program. What does the Gateway program do for the individual? What are some of the things that you can do?
Well, first and foremost, he does learn. We don't teach him. He learns it through just being exposed to the process. Because, first of all, we are totally non-sectarian, have no religious base or no political base either. So we call it the gateway to freedom in a way. But what the key freedom is freedom from the fear of the unknown, and that principal unknown being what is beyond this physical existence. And the moment a person learns that, and it alters his life here so spectacularly, because all this, if you look around you, you find so much of what you do is based upon fear. And most of it is fear of non-survival, one way or another. So if you can think of that as being a key thing, and you also learn to accept and explore one's own self, and that self-exploration takes place, again, on the part of the individual, but because once he is free of that fear, then he is free to explore his self first. Never mind all this other spectacular areas. Learns to free himself of all of the restraints that he had self-induced within him. He doesn't become a violent person, he becomes a free person. There's a great difference.
All right. If you have a couple minutes, your comments and a few ideas. Prayer.
Prayer? The interesting thing about prayer, somewhere along the way, 2,000, 5,000 years ago, whatever, someone learned a system where that would induce a communication or contact into these other energy systems. And, in other words, ask for help is another way to put it. And used methods and techniques that indeed did do that. But as this was handed down step by step through generation after generation, what worked 5,000 years ago, someone along the way says, well, why should I clap my hands? I don't need to clap my hands, so I'll just say the prayer. Or someone says down here, well, I don't need to close my eyes, I'll keep my eyes open. A whole series of things, of patterns that would induce the result from the prayer have been deteriorated, distorted, and forgotten through all these years.
There's obviously a right way then to pray.
That's correct, yes. Mm-hmm.
All right. Can we know it, or is it too long? How about a synopsis?
Well, go to Focus 12.
All right, Focus 12.
Yeah.
Angels and archangels, archetypes.
Yeah.
Comments.
From the perspective of where we are now.
No, first-hand perspective, from your perspective.
Yeah. From my perspective now, there is a system of, let's call it helpers, that is a part of each individual. And those helpers are in continual service of that individual and are aimed specifically at that individual. But the interesting part is who they are. Would you like to know?
Of course. Definitely.
They are parts of you, and they are parts of you who have lived previous lives.
So the guides, for example, are existences that we have had, and we are now, let's say, compartmentalized right now with a focus. One part of us is focused.
That's right.
In time, space, and the other parts of us are not focused.
That's right. And so you need a little help to fix a sore toe. Well, one of your in one of your life personalities 20,000 years ago knows all about fixing sore toes.
How do we get in touch with them? What focus?
Well, that comes out of 21.
That's focus 21.
Mm-hmm.
Intelligent animals.
Intelligent animals. Well, let me tell you that I can give you an illustration of that. Animals are working in this other energy system automatically, just as we do. But I can give you an illustration of how they use it. It's very crude, but very workable. We have a few cats where we live, and they roam around in the woods outside. Now, here is a two double closed door system into our kitchen. And we thought, well, when my wife opens the cat food on the can opener, they hear it, and that's what makes them come running. But they're hearing it through a double door. So we say, oh, well, they're smelling the aroma of the cat food once it's open. And how could they do this through all these closed doors? So we tried a little nice, neat device. My wife, all she had to do was think of the process of opening the can and feeding the animals, and they came rushing from 100 yards away. You understand?
Very good. I like that.
And we've demonstrated that many, many times, just to give you an illustration of animals using patterns that we use and don't know that we're using them. The cat knows.
Okay, here's one of the big ones. Sexuality.
Well, I can give you a fast answer for that. Would you like it?
I sure would.
Let's try a short one. No, nobody wants a short answer.
I know.
So, well, think of it here. This, as when you took up residence here, you were given, because of what I call this Earth life system, it is a survival system that you have to survive. Not first and foremost, you survive yourself so that you can indeed help the species survive. So when you were, quote, born, you're not necessarily in your DNA, but at the animal sub-self level, as I like to call it, you got this imprint that said survive. So if you talk about what that means, it means certain things. It means keep warm, get food, and reproduce. And that's what it is. And so a very vital part of that reproduction drive we call sex. And it's a very, very heavily motivating force in our lives. And of course, all of our biggest problem is that we, moving into such a system, where this survival system, we dominated all the other species in our survival mode, so we became, being as much as the whole thing is a predator system, we, as predators, didn't have anybody else left to do. We got all the animals taken care of, so we became predators on an intra-species base. And that's where we are right now. Look around you, you can see it.
Okay, just a couple more things and I'll let you go. And I really appreciate the fact that you've taken this time, Mr. Monroe. Mind food. Mind food.
Yes.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about mind food?
Well, anything that lets you begin to fully exercise this really, it truly is unlimited, but we only know how to use our mind in a limited way. And theoretically, education is a form of mind food. There are other ways of learning things and how to apply the mind that we simply don't bother with in our culture.
Well, Robert, I appreciate you taking the time to be on the show. Do you have anything you'd like to conclude with to my listeners? Anything?
No, the only main conclusion that you can come is that we look at this mass roiling world in which we live, and if you begin to recognize that there is a very profound purpose in all